you probably woke up this morning, swung your legs out of bed, looked in the bathroom mirror, and just naturally assumed that the person staring back at you is the exact same you that went to sleep last night.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh.
I mean, it's the ultimate default setting of the human operating system, right?
Yeah.
We never even think to question it.
Right. It's like the most fundamental assumption we make as human beings. You think you have a soul, or, if you aren't religious, you at least believe there is this permanent, solid self that's basically driving the biological vehicle of your body.
Yeah, the driver behind the wheel.
Exactly.
Right.
But what if you are completely wrong? Like, what if instead of a solid driver behind the wheel, you are actually just a momentary whirlpool of five very distinct, completely impersonal processes?
And processes that are, constantly, relentlessly tricking themselves into existence second by second.
Right. Creating this whole illusion of a you.
Yeah.
And welcome, by the way, to the listener. Today's deep dive is, well, it's going to get intense.
It really is a profoundly disorienting proposition when you first hear it.
Yeah.
I mean, it pulls the rug out from under every assumption we have about identity, about agency, and even what it means to be alive.
Yeah, and that is exactly our mission today. We are taking a massive stack of source material, specifically this incredibly detailed textual analysis of original Buddhist mechanics, and we are extracting the hardcore underlying machinery of the human mind.
Right, because we are moving entirely past the westernized, fluffy, kind of light self-help version of mindfulness that you see on, like, Instagram.
Yeah, no pastel quotes today. We want to understand exactly how the mind manufactures suffering and the precise mechanical blueprint for dismantling that factory.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's unpack this. If I'm not the permanent guy in the mirror, what exactly am I?
Well, to answer that, we have to start at the absolute bedrock of the Buddha's analytical framework. I mean, before we could even begin to solve the problem of human suffering, we have to define exactly who or what is actually suffering in the first place.
Okay, so where do we start with that?
We have to look at what the texts call the five aggregates. In the original Pali language, this is the Panyaka Khanda.
The five heaves.
Exactly. When the Buddha was asked, what is a person or what is a being, he didn't point to a soul. He didn't point to some divine spark. He formulated this analysis that broke human experience down into these five streams of phenomena or heaps.
I really want to make this super concrete for the listener because otherwise it just sounds like abstract philosophy, right? Let's use a mundane, real-world example.
Okay, I love practical examples. Let's do it.
Say I am sitting at my kitchen table and I'm holding a cup of freshly brewed hot coffee. How do these five aggregates actually explain the experience of me holding this coffee? Let's take them one by one.
That is a perfect scenario to ground this. So the first aggregate is form, or rupa. This encompasses basically all physical matter and material phenomena.
Okay, so the actual stuff.
Right. In your coffee example, form is the physical weight of the ceramic mug in your hand. It's the dark liquid inside it, the steam rising in the air, and critically, it is also the physical flesh, bone, and nervous system of your hand itself.
Got it. So form is basically the realm of physics and biology. It's the hardware. That makes sense.
It's the material base. But, mere physical matter doesn't constitute an experience on its own. A rock has form, but it doesn't experience anything. That brings us to the second aggregate, which is feeling, or Vedana.
And we need to be incredibly careful here, right? Because in English, feeling usually implies like a complex emotion, like sadness or joy or nostalgia.
Oh, yeah, completely. If you ask me how I'm feeling, I might say anxious about work or excited for the weekend.
Right.
But in this original framework, Vedana is much, much simpler and way faster than that. It is strictly the raw, immediate tone of any given experience, and it only comes in three flavors: pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral.
Just a basic biological tag.
Yes. So the warmth of that coffee mug radiating into your skin if it's a freezing cold winter morning, that tone registers instantly as pleasant.
But if I just pulled that mug out of a boiling microwave and it's scalding my skin, the tone registers instantly as unpleasant.
Precisely. It's just a biological binary, or I guess trinary if you include neutral.
Yeah.
It's just raw data, good, bad, or whatever. There's no narrative attached to it yet.
Okay, so when does the narrative start? Because obviously I don't just feel heat, I know it's coffee.
The narrative starts with a third aggregate, which is perception, or sanya. This is the cognitive function of recognition and labeling. So the heat hits your hand, the pleasant feeling arises, and immediately perception steps in and slaps a label on that raw data based on your memory. It says, that's coffee, or that's my favorite blue mug, or just that's heat.
So perception is sort of like the part of my brain rapidly flipping through a massive internal Rolodex to figure out what I'm interacting with. Like it matches current sensory input to past experiences.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. It categorizes the world so you can actually navigate it. But once you recognize the object, you usually react to it, right?
Yeah.
And that brings us to the fourth aggregate, which is arguably the most complex. It's mental formations, or sakkara.
Yeah, the source documents describe this one as a huge catch-all category.
It really is. It includes all volitions, intentions, habits, and what we would normally call complex emotional reactions.
So how does that apply to the coffee?
Well, based on your perception recognizing the coffee and that pleasant feeling tone, your mental formations generate the intention to raise the mug to your lips and take a sip.
Or I guess if my perception remembered that this specific brand of coffee gave me terrible heartburn yesterday, my mental formations might generate a habitual hesitation or a feeling of aversion.
Spot on. It is the active, responding, constructing part of the mind. It's doing all the heavy lifting of your personality.
Okay, so we have the physical hardware, which is form. We have the raw, pleasant, or unpleasant tag, which is feeling. The labeling Rolodex, perception. And the active reaction engine, mental formations. What's the fifth one that ties it all together?
The fifth is consciousness,
Uh,
vinyasa. But again, we have to strip away our Western assumptions here.
because it's not a soul.
Right, it's not some grand transcendent soul consciousness. In this system, consciousness is simply the bare awareness of a sense object. It is the base layer of cognition that allows the other mental processes to even occur.
So it's like the screen that the movie plays on.
A bit more localized than that, actually.
Mm-hmm.
The texts talk about 6 distinct types of consciousness. There is eye consciousness that arises when a visual object meets the eye. There is body consciousness that arises when the mug meets the hand. There's even mind consciousness that arises when a thought meets the intellect.
Oh, wow. So it's just the basic event of knowing an object at each specific sense door. Okay, so form, feeling, perception, mental formations, consciousness. That is the entire machinery of human experience. But here is the philosophical punchline from the sources that totally shifted my perspective. When you examine yourself, like when you really meditate and look deeply at who you are, all you ever find are these 5 processes.
Yeah, you know.
Right. You never find a permanent self standing behind them. And the absolute kicker is that every single one of these aggregates is constantly changing, and none of them are fully under your control.
That is the core doctrine of anatta, which translates to non-self. The Buddha laid this out explicitly in a text called the Anattalakkhaṇḍutta, which is traditionally considered his second major teaching.
And what's fascinating is that he doesn't just state it as some mystical revelation, right? He walks his listeners through a very rigorous, almost surgical, logical argument.
Yeah, it's brilliant. He basically takes each aggregate one by one and asks us a really simple question. Can this be the self?
How does the argument work?
He says, look, if form were the self, you would have absolute sovereignty over it. You could command your body, let my body be thus, let my body not be thus. You could tell it not to age, not to get sick, not to accumulate injuries.
But you can't. Your physical form does exactly what it wants based on external causes and conditions.
Right. And if feeling were the self, you could just demand to feel pleasant tones all the time.
I could just say, I am going to experience nothing but pure joy today, starting now, but I can't do that. Painful feelings arise completely uninvited. I stub my toe, and I feel pain whether I want to or not.
Precisely. Because none of these 5 aggregates are permanent, and because they're not subject to your absolute control, the Buddha concludes that there cannot be a fixed, unchanging self or soul hiding within them or behind them.
The self you think you are is actually an optical illusion generated by the incredibly rapid interaction of these 5 heaps.
It's all just causes and conditions playing out.
I love how the original text used similes to describe this because, frankly, it's a terrifying concept to wrap your head around at first. In the Fina Sutta, the Buddha uses these incredibly beautiful, almost poetic, but ultimately haunting images to describe how hollow we really are.
The similes in that sutta are amazing. He says the physical body, form, is like a lump of foam floating down the Ganges River.
Yeah, from a distance, it looks like a solid, substantial mass. But when a perceptive person gets up close and inspects it, they see it's just trapped air, it's void.
And feeling is described as a water bubble forming on the surface of a puddle during a heavy rainstorm. It pops almost as soon as it exists. It has absolutely no core and no duration.
And perception is compared to a shimmering mirage in the heat of summer. It tricks the eye into seeing water where there is only dry sand.
The one that really stands out is metal formations. The text compares them to a hollow banana tree.
I actually had to look this up when we were doing the research because I didn't get it at first. Apparently, a banana tree doesn't have a solid wooden trunk like an oak tree, right?
Right. If you take an axe to a banana tree and start peeling away the sheaths of the trunk, you just get more layers and more layers until you reach the center, and there is absolutely nothing there, no solid wood core at all.
It is a profoundly brilliant metaphor for human personality. I mean, we desperately want to believe we have this deep, essential core identity. But if you sit down and truly peel back your habits, your political views, your emotional reactions, your acquired preferences, there is no solid wood inside.
It's just layers of conditioned responses that you picked up from your parents, your culture, and your past experiences.
And finally, consciousness itself is described as a magician's illusion.
A magic trick, yes. A skilled illusionist at a crossroads performing a trick. It completely deceives the audience into thinking there is a continuous, solid subject experiencing the world, when really it is just a rapid, flickering sequence of bare awareness arising and passing away, frame by frame, like a movie reel.
No, I have to push back here because this is where my brain starts to rebel against the material. In our research, specifically in some modern summaries of this philosophy, I saw this whole system compared to a machine.
The machine analogy.
Yeah. The analogy was that the 5 aggregates are the physical parts of the machine, your mind and body. But if I'm a machine and these aggregates are the parts, the gears, the engine, the steering wheel, doesn't there logically have to be someone operating the machine? There has to be a driver behind the wheel, right, who is experiencing the aggregates.
That reaction is exactly why the machine metaphor, while it might seem helpful as a first pass, actually breaks down completely upon closer inspection. In fact, it subtly misleads us by smuggling in the exact false assumptions the Buddha was trying to destroy.
Wait, how does it smuggle in false assumptions?
Because a machine implies a stable chassis. It implies discrete, permanent parts that hold together over time. I mean, an engine block sits there in the driveway, even when the car is turned off. A steering wheel is a solid noun.
But the entire point of the aggregates is that they are not parts of a permanent thing.
Exactly. They are events. They are streams of phenomena. There is no chassis holding them together. There is no car outside of the movement itself.
So if a machine is a bad analogy, what should I use to understand this? I was thinking earlier, is it like a digital avatar in a video game? Or maybe one of those spinning LED fans that projects a hologram.
The spinning LED fan is actually a fantastic modern update. You look at the fan, and your eye perceives a solid, glowing circle of light. You can point to it and say, there is a circle.
But if you reach out and try to grab the solid circle, you just get your hand smacked by a single plastic blade that is moving incredibly fast.
Right. The circle doesn't exist as an object. It only exists as a trick of speed and human perception.
That makes a lot of sense. The classical texts use natural phenomena for the same idea, right? Like a flame or a whirlpool.
Yes. Look at a whirlpool in a river. A whirlpool maintains a highly visible, apparent continuity. It holds its shape. You can point at it and say, there is a whirlpool. But nothing in that whirlpool stays the same from one microsecond to the next.
The actual water molecules are constantly rushing in, spinning, and flowing out. It is a pattern of movement, not an object.
Precisely. And when you look at it that way, your question, who operates the machine, becomes totally irrelevant. It's a nonsense question. You wouldn't ask, who is driving the whirlpool?
Oh, wow. Yeah, you wouldn't.
The assumption that there must be a driver is the ultimate target of the Anatta teaching. There is a very famous classical Buddhist analogy for this from a later text called the Milindapanya.
The chariot analogy.
Yes. A brilliantly analytical monk named Nagasena is having a debate with King Milinda. The king is skeptical about this no-self business. So Nagasena points to the king's royal chariot and asks him to define it. He says, is the chariot the wheels? The king says no. Is it the axle? No. Is the wooden frame? No.
So the word chariot is just a convention.
Right. Nagasena forces the king to admit that chariot is just a convenient label we use to describe a specific collection of parts when they are arranged in a functional, temporary way. But there is no invisible, metaphysical chariot essence hovering over the wheels and the axle.
When you take it apart, the chariot vanishes.
Exactly. The same exact logic applies to the word person, or I, or you. It is just a convenient label for the 5 aggregates functioning together in a specific causal arrangement.
So to synthesize this first major piece of the puzzle for you listening, you are not a noun, you are a verb, you are a process, you are the spinning fan, the whirlpool, the burning flame. But, this realization immediately brings us to a massive practical problem.
Which is?
If we are just an impersonal whirlpool of biological and mental aggregates, why does it hurt so much to exist? If there is no me in the center, why do we experience so much pain, anxiety, grief, and stress?
Because, as the texts vividly describe, the whirlpool is on fire.
Which moves us into the core diagnosis of the human condition. Let's look at the famous Four Noble Truths. And what I found so compelling in the source material is that the framework the Buddha used for these truths wasn't meant to be abstract philosophy. It was actually based on the standard model of ancient Indian medicine.
Yes, the Buddha is frequently referred to in the text as the great physician. And if you look at the structure of the Four Noble Truths, they perfectly mirror a clinical medical diagnosis.
How so?
First, the doctor states the symptom, what is the disease? Second, the doctor identifies the underlying cause of the disease. Third, the doctor gives the prognosis, is this condition actually curable? And fourth, the doctor writes the prescription, the specific treatment plan to achieve the cure.
Let's talk about the symptom. We use the word fire all the time in modern language to describe our emotions, right? We talk about the heat of passion or burning with anger, but we use it loosely. The Buddha, however, was incredibly precise with this metaphor.
Very precise. In a famous text called the Aditapuriya Sutta, which is known as the Fire Sermon, he basically stands before an audience of former fire-worshipping priests and declares that absolute everything is burning. The eyes are burning. The things you see are burning. The consciousness arising from them is burning.
But what exactly is the fire?
In the Buddha's precise diagnostic usage, the fire refers to the defilements, or kilesas. Specifically, he points to three massive, actively burning forces in the human mind: the fire of greed, the fire of hatred, and the fire of delusion.
These are the active combustions that distort our reality. But if there is a blazing fire, physics dictates there has to be fuel keeping it alive, right?
The fuel is craving, or taishan. That is the combustible material. Craving is the continuous desire for things to be other than they are.
And what about the heat, the actual damage that the fire causes to the environment around it?
That heat is dukkha, suffering. Dukkha is the subjective experience of being on fire. It is the painful heat radiating from the flames of greed, hatred, and delusion. It is vital to understand that dukkha is the effect, not the fire itself.
And the material that is actually on fire, like the wood in the fireplace that is being consumed?
That is the aggregates themselves, your own mind and body. It's fascinating. The Pali word for clinging or attachment is upadana, and the texts constantly refer to the 5 clinging aggregates, but the literal translation of upadana is fuel or sustenance. You are made of fuel.
That is a staggering, almost terrifying image. Let's re-examine the Four Noble Truths through this specific hardcore fire imagery, because honestly, it changes how you look at the entire tradition. Let's start with truth number 1, dukkha, the medical symptom. The diagnosis is you're burning.
Right. The first truth is the honest, unflinching recognition that you are on fire. Life, as ordinarily lived by an unawakened person, is fundamentally unsatisfactory. And we need to be clear that dukkha doesn't just mean dramatic catastrophic pain like getting a terminal illness or experiencing a tragic death.
The Buddha categorized dukkha into layers, didn't he?
He did. The obvious pain is just the surface layer. The next layer down is the distress of change. This is the tragic reality that even when things are going great, you fall in love, you get a promotion, you feel healthy, those states are inherently unstable. They will end, and their eventual loss will cause you pain.
But the deepest layer is even subtler than that.
Yes, the deepest layer is the subtle background hum of unsatisfactoriness in just existing as a conditioned being. It's the sheer exhausting effort required to keep the aggregates together. The heat is real, even when it is mild enough for you to ignore it while watching Netflix on Tuesday afternoon.
So the symptom is the heat. That leads to truth number 2. Samudaya, the cause. The fire has fuel.
This was a radical shift from the religious norms of the Buddha's time. He is saying the burning isn't a random punishment from an angry god. It isn't a cosmic test. It isn't unavoidable fate. It has a specific observable cause: craving.
The craving for sensual pleasure, the craving to exist and become something, and even the craving for non-existence, like the desire to annihilate yourself when you are depressed.
Exactly. Craving is the hand that is continuously throwing fresh fuel onto the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion. And, believe it or not, this is actually the most hopeful diagnostic move ever made in human history.
How is finding out that my craving is the fuel hopeful?
Because if your suffering has a specific dependent cause, it is not a permanent brute fact about reality. Processes that depend on causes can be stopped. If you remove the cause, the effect must cease.
Which brings us to truth number 3, Nirodha, the prognosis. The doctor says the fire can go out. And this is the famous concept of Nibbana.
Right. Nibbana is widely misunderstood in the West as some sort of Buddhist heaven or a mystical trance state. But the word Nibbana literally means something akin to blowing out or extinguishing or unbinding.
It is the state of the fire when the fuel runs out.
Yes. If the fuel supply of craving completely stops, the fire of greed, hatred, and delusion must go out by its own nature. Complete cessation of craving means complete cessation of the burning heat of dukkha. The disease is curable.
And the cure is truth number 4, Magga, the prescription. Here is how to stop feeding the fire, the Noble Eightfold Path.
Notice how incredibly practical, almost engineering-minded this is. You cannot just willy forest fire to go out. You can't stand in front of a bonfire and yell at it to stop burning. It won't care. You have to systematically cut off the fuel supply at its source.
The Noble Eightfold Path is the method to retrain your understanding, your ethical behavior, and your mental focus so that the craving stops arising in the first place. I really want you, the listener, to think about this in the context of your own daily life. When we are suffering, when we are feeling that painful heat of existence, what do we usually do? We try to fix it by getting exactly what we crave.
We do, constantly.
We think, I am stressed and miserable at work, so I need to buy this expensive gadget to feel better, or I am lonely, so I desperately need to consume this relationship or this experience. According to this model, we are literally throwing gasoline on ourselves to try and put out a fire.
It is the ultimate tragic irony of the human condition. We are frantically feeding the flames to try and escape the heat.
But knowing this concept intellectually, just hearing us talk about it on this deep dive and nodding your head, that isn't enough to stop the fire, is it?
No, not at all. And this is a vital distinction in the source materials. The Buddha drew a massive, unbridgeable distinction between conceptual knowledge and true, liberating wisdom. Conceptual knowledge is what you and I are doing right now.
We're just talking about it.
Right. You can memorize the Four Noble Truths. You can pass a graduate-level university exam on Buddhist philosophy. The texts call this Suttamaya Panya, which means wisdom derived from hearing or reading. But a person can give a brilliant, flawless lecture on the mechanics of craving while being absolutely consumed by jealousy and addiction in their private life.
So what is the alternative? What is true wisdom?
True wisdom, which is Panya, must be penetrative. The Pali word is pa'iveda. It means piercing through, having a direct, unmediated realization. The Buddha was adamant that these four truths are not just facts to be believed. They are specific tasks that must be done.
Tasks. How do you do a truth?
Each truth has a corresponding duty. The truth of dukkha must be fully comprehended and understood. The truth of craving must be entirely abandoned and relinquished. The truth of cessation must be personally realized. And the truth of the path must be cultivated and developed.
In the notes, it mentions that the Buddha didn't consider himself fully awakened until his knowledge of each of the four truths was complete in 3 turnings, which makes 12 aspects in total. What does that mean?
The 3 turnings are the stages of mastering the tasks. First, knowing the truth conceptually, this is suffering. Second, knowing the task that the truth entails, this suffering must be understood. And third, knowing definitively that the task has actually been accomplished, this suffering has been fully understood.
Ah, so it's not just theory.
No. You only fully know the second truth when your craving has actually been relinquished, not just when you understand why it should be. It's the difference between reading a physics textbook on fluid dynamics and actually being in the deep water, feeling the physical buoyancy, and successfully moving your arms to swim.
Okay, so let's extrapolate. Let's say someone actually achieves this. Let's say they jump in the water, they do the grueling work, they complete the 12 aspects, and they hit truth number 3. Nibbana, the extinguishment. What happens next? When the fire goes out, does the person just vanish into thin air like a popped bubble? Do they cease to exist right then and there?
This is one of the most common and persistent misconceptions about Buddhism. People assume it's a path of immediate annihilation. But the tradition is very careful to distinguish between 2 distinct phases of Nibbana.
Right. The texts talk about Nibbana with residue and Nibbana without residue. Can you explain the difference?
Nibbana with residue, the Pali term is sa-upadhisis, refers to a living awakened being, an arahant or a Buddha who is still walking around on earth. For this person, the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion have gone out completely. The fuel supply is totally severed.
But they are still physically there.
Yes. The aggregates, the physical body, the neurological capacity to feel, perceive, and think, were set in motion by past karmic causes, and they have momentum. They continue to function until the natural exhaustion of the physical body.
So it's like a campfire that has been completely doused with water. The flames are entirely gone, but if you touch the logs, the embers are still physically warm.
Exactly. The fuel of craving is gone, but the physical and mental residue of the aggregates remains. They still experience physical pain if they cut their foot, but they don't generate mental anguish about it. Nibbana without residue, on the other hand, happens at the exact moment of the awakened being's biological death.
The final end of the process.
Right. The aggregates finally break apart and cease, and because there is zero craving left to spark a new fire, nothing is grasped anew. The process simply stops.
But this raises a fascinating psychological question for me. If craving is the absolute engine of human action, if literally every ordinary thing we do, from eating breakfast to going to work, is driven by wanting something or avoiding something, how did the Buddha actually function?
A great question.
He reached extinguishment under the Bodhi tree at age 35. He lived for 45 more years. So what drove him to wake up, walk across India, talk to people, and teach for 4.5 decades? If he had no craving, wasn't he just a catatonic robot?
It's a brilliant question, and it reveals a profound, subtle depth to the philosophy. The Buddhist teaching requires us to distinguish craving from motivation itself. We assume they are the same thing, but they aren't.
Okay, what's the difference?
Craving is a specific, afflicted, grasping mode of wanting. It is inherently self-centered. It operates on the deep delusion that acquiring a specific object will permanently complete yourself or protect yourself. But that is not the only energetic way to move through the world.
So if it wasn't craving, what was his motivation to act?
Pure compassion.
Perfect.
Cardo. The texts actually tell a story that right after his enlightenment, the Buddha inclined toward not teaching. He looked at humanity and thought, the truth I've discovered is too subtle, it goes against the stream of the world, and people are far too blinded by attachment to understand it.
He thought it would just be a waste of time.
Basically, it would just be exhausting. He had absolutely zero craving for followers, no desire for fame, no egoic need to be seen as a grand savior.
So what changed his mind?
The mythos says he surveyed the world with his Buddha eye and saw that there were beings with little dust in their eyes, people who were right on the edge of understanding, but who would be utterly lost to suffering without the Dhamma. He chose to teach purely out of boundless compassion, for the welfare and benefit of others, not because he needed to extract any meaning, validation, or identity from them.
So life without craving isn't catatonia or paralysis.
Far from it. When the rigid defensive self-structure collapses, action actually flows much more freely and spontaneously, because nothing is being anxiously hoarded or aggressively defended. He ate meals, he slept, he taught daily, he handled petty disputes among his monks, he even dealt with betrayal and severe physical illness. But he did all of this with absolute equanimity. Things happened through him, without being for him.
And crucially, his actions during those 45 years didn't generate any new karma, right?
Correct. The technical term used in the later psychology for an awakened being's actions is kriya, which translates to merely functional action. Because his actions were completely uprooted from greed, hatred, or delusion, they were kamically sterile. They generated no binding momentum to propel him into a future birth. They were just pure functional responses to the present moment.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This exploration of a perfectly compassionate, selfless being actually brings up a fascinating thought experiment from our source material. It's a question that bridges two massive global cultures, and I want to dive into it because it clarifies the boundaries of the Buddhist framework. From the strict, original perspective of the Buddha's teachings, did Jesus Christ attain Nibbana?
It is a phenomenal question, and just to set the ground rules for the listener, we are looking at this impartially, strictly through the analytical lens of the Buddhist text provided in our research, to see what this comparison reveals about the internal logic of Buddhism itself. We aren't making theological judgments about either religion, we're just reporting on the source material.
Exactly. So let's start with the points in favor. If a highly trained Buddhist monastic was evaluating the historical life and behavior of Jesus, what would they see?
They would see a being who consistently displayed behavioral qualities that Buddhism prizes at the absolute highest level. Jesus demonstrated radical self-sacrificial compassion. He taught active love for enemies.
And his forgiveness of his executioners while on the cross.
Yes, saying, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. That is, from a Buddhist perspective, a staggering, almost incomprehensible display of non-hatred and non-aversion. He lived in voluntary poverty, proving he was completely free from worldly greed for wealth or political power. And he showed incredible physical equanimity under horrific torture.
Which explains why so many modern Buddhist masters deeply revere him.
Yes. Prominent teachers like Thich Nhat Hanh have written extensively about Jesus, treating him as a profoundly awakened teacher and even keeping his image on their altars. The behavioral overlap in terms of selflessness and overcoming worldly defilements is undeniable.
But when we dig into the actual doctrine, the philosophical machinery, there is a massive roadblock.
There is an insurmountable doctrinal roadblock
Yes.
if we apply the strict scholastic analysis of the Pali texts. Jesus' teaching centers fundamentally on the existence of an eternal creator God, an everlasting personal soul, and the ultimate goal of eternal life in a heavenly kingdom.
And from the strict Buddhist perspective we've been discussing, why is that a deal breaker for Nibbana?
Because in the Buddhist framework, the craving for eternal existence, which is called pavatasha, is the absolute paradigm of delusion. It is one of the three specific types of craving that act as the primary fuel keeping the fire of suffering burning. The Buddha explicitly classified eternalism, the view that a soul or a self persists forever, as a dangerous wrong view that binds beings tightly to the cycle of rebirth and suffering.
So wanting to live forever in heaven is just another form of craving.
Exactly. Remember, Nibbana is defined by the complete uprooting of the view of a permanent self. So a strict Theravada scholastic would be forced to conclude that while Jesus was a remarkably compassionate, extraordinarily spiritually advanced being, his core doctrinal teachings affirm the exact illusions that Nibbana requires you to extinguish.
So, by the absolute letter of the law in the Pali Canon, the answer is no. But the sources point out a third position that attempts to reconcile this.
Yes, there is the perspective that the two frameworks might simply be incommensurable. Jesus wasn't trying to achieve the Buddhist project. His stated goal was union with the divine, not the cessation of craving as defined by the Buddha. Measuring a saint from one tradition by the specific finish line of another tradition is always going to cause analytical friction.
But some Mahayana Buddhist traditions try to bridge this gap using a specific concept, don't they?
Right, they use the concept of skillful means, or upaya. The idea here is that a truly awakened, omniscient being will teach the truth in whatever language, metaphor, or framework their specific audience can comprehend.
So they sort of adapt the message to the audience.
Exactly. So a Mahayana thinker might argue that Jesus' God language and talk of eternal souls was a skillful vehicle, meant to guide the tribal, monotheistic people of first-century Judea toward ultimate reality, using the only vocabulary they possessed. But we have to admit, objectively, that is a uniquely Buddhist reinterpretation. It absorbs Jesus into a Buddhist framework, making him a covert bodhisattva, rather than meeting his theology on its own genuine Christian terms.
It's an incredible thought experiment, mostly because it highlights just how uncompromising and radical the Buddhist stance on the self and the soul really was. He didn't just reject bad selves, he rejected the highest, holiest concepts of a permanent self, too. Which brings us to a crucial mechanical question.
Okay, let's hear it.
If eternalism and the soul are complete delusions, how exactly does the mind manufacture this illusion of a self every single second? If the aggregates we talked about earlier are the raw materials, the process, what is the how?
The how is an intricate causal system called dependent origination. It was the Buddha's masterpiece. It is the wiring diagram of the mind. It explains the exact mechanism of how the mental machine catches fire and generates suffering step by step. It is traditionally presented as a chain of 12 interconnected links, showing how existence and suffering arise through a sequence of conditions.
Okay, I want to trace this wire, but the source documents list all 12 links, and honestly, if we just read them off, it sounds like an ancient, incomprehensible phone book. I want to ground this. Let's use a modern scenario.
Sounds good.
Imagine I am sitting quietly at my desk, having a perfectly peaceful morning, and suddenly I get an unexpected email from my boss that just says, "We need to talk immediately. Your project has major issues." My stomach drops, my heart rate spikes, and I instantly become a ball of defensive anxiety. How does the 12-link chain explain how I went from peace to panic in half a second?
That is the perfect way to explore this. We are going to slow down time and look at the microseconds of that reaction. The chain technically starts with link 1, ignorance, or avidya. This isn't stupidity. It's a fundamental blindness to the reality of impermanence and non-self.
So it's like a baseline unawareness.
Yes. Because of this underlying ignorance, it conditions link 2, formations, which are your deeply ingrained karmic habits and defensive survival instincts. These formations condition link 3, consciousness, the basic awareness ready to receive data. which conditions link 4. Name and form your physical and mental organism sitting at the desk, which conditions link 5. The 6th sense basis in this case, your eyes looking at the computer monitor.
Okay, so links 1 through 5 are basically the prerequisite setup. It's the loaded gun sitting on the table before the email even arrives.
Exactly. The action really starts at link 6. Contact. The visual data of the email text makes contact with your eye sense base. Contact automatically conditions link 7. Feeling. Remember, this is the Vedana, the raw tone. The implication of the words major issues registers instantly as a highly unpleasant feeling tone.
And this is where the critical pivot happens, the most actionable part of the whole chain, link 7 to link 8.
Yes, this is the vital joint. Everything up through feeling happens automatically. You have a nervous system, so contact is inevitable. Contact automatically produces a pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral tone. Even the Buddha felt physical pain when a rock splinter hit his foot. But here is the secret of the entire philosophy. Feeling does not have to become link 8. Craving.
That is where the circuit can be broken.
Exactly. Craving is the moment you blindly react to the feeling tone. You experience the unpleasant tone of the email, and you instantly crave for it to stop. You want to push it away. You crave validation. Craving is the moment where wisdom can intervene.
Which is why mindfulness is so important, right?
Yes, this is why Buddhist mindfulness practice focuses so heavily on observing our feelings without reacting. If you can catch the process right there, at the raw feeling tone, and just observe the unpleasantness without grasping or pushing, the chain doesn't complete. The fire doesn't ignite.
But wait, let me push back on this because I see a logical loophole here. Some modern mindfulness teachers say we can just sit there, watch our feelings, not react, and boom, we are enlightened. We just cut the chain at link 7. But if we do that, aren't we completely bypassing ignorance, which is all the way back at link 1? Can't we just use bare mindfulness to sidestep ignorance entirely and hack the system?
It's a very common, very appealing assumption, but the classical sources validate the tension there and completely correct that misunderstanding. You cannot bypass ignorance. The mistake is thinking that ignorance odisha is just a starting block at the beginning of a linear timeline, existing only in the past.
If it's not just in the past, where is it hiding in the present moment?
According to a brilliant text called MN44, ignorance lies latent specifically in neutral feeling. The texts map the 3 root defilements onto the 3 feeling tones. The defilement of lust lies latent in pleasant feeling. The defilement of aversion lies latent in painful feeling. And ignorance lies latent in neutral feeling.
Oh, wow.
So when you are watching that joint between feeling and craving, you are not bypassing ignorance. You are confronting it exactly where it is actively operating in real time.
So mere suppression, like just gritting your teeth and holding back your reaction to the email, isn't enough?
No. Restraint without deep insight is just suppression. It's temporary. You're just pressing the weeds down with a heavy rock. The moment you take the rock away, they spring back up. True insight cuts the root. You have to watch the feeling arise, watch it pass away, and truly see that it is impermanent and not a part of a self. That direct seeing is what actually dismantles the underlying ignorance.
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's trace the chain further down, because the email reaction isn't over. Feeling turns to craving. I crave to not be in trouble. Craving intensifies into link 9. Clinging. I cling to my reputation. And then we hit link 10, bhava, which is usually translated as becoming. This seems like a really opaque, heavily debated concept in the sources. What exactly is becoming in the context of my email panic?
It is the mechanism that converts your present grasping into future arising. It is the loaded spring. If clinging is the act of pulling back the string of a bow, becoming is the fully drawn bow, trembling with directed tension and momentum, ready to release the arrow.
Traditionally, this is read across multiple lifetimes, right? Like the karmic momentum that pushes you into your next biological birth.
Yes, the classical 3-life model interprets it that way. But there is also a profoundly relevant psychological reading that happens right here, in this very moment. Bhava is the psychological process of identity formation happening right now.
Walk me through that. How do I become an identity over an email?
You feel the unpleasant tone, you crave for it to stop, you cling to your self-image as a good employee, and out of that intense clinging, bhava occurs. A self is rapidly constructed to deal with the threat. You literally become the offended, anxious, defensive person. The aggregates dynamically organize themselves into a rigid identity structure designed to fight your boss.
And then link 11 is birth. So that's the full manifestation of that defensive identity in the present moment. I am now fully acting as angry employee.
Exactly. And link 12, the final link, is aging and death. which means the inevitable collapse of that temporary identity. Because you can't stay furious and defensive forever. The adrenaline fades, the meeting ends, and letting go of that identity, watching it decay, involves stress and suffering. We are continuously manufacturing a self, giving birth to it and watching it die hundreds of times a day. It is utterly exhausting.
Which perfectly sets up the next major dilemma. Because if we are constantly becoming a self out of thin air in this life, what happens when the physical body actually dies? How does rebirth work in the system if Buddhism strictly insists there is no soul to reincarnate, if there's no me who gets reborn?
This is where the Buddha drew a razor-sharp, uncompromising line, separating his teachings from Hinduism, Jainism, and later Christianity. He taught a middle way that explicitly rejected two major philosophical extremes: eternalism and annihilationism.
Let's define those quickly to set the stakes for the listener.
Eternalism is the view that a permanent, essential soul persists through the event of death and simply moves into a new body, like a person taking off an old set of clothes and putting on a new one. The core you remains intact. Annihilationism, on the other hand, is the materialist view that a solid self exists right now, but is completely and permanently destroyed at the moment of biological death.
And the Buddha said both of these seemingly opposite views are wrong because they actually share the exact same false premise. They both assume that there is a solid self to begin with.
Exactly. In the Buddhist model of rebirth, nothing travels. There is no passenger sitting in a metaphysical train moving from one life to the next. Bhava becoming is pure momentum, not an entity. What continues across the threshold of death is exactly what continues across each moment of life: a rapid, causal stream of energy and karmic information.
The analogies provided in the sources to explain this are so vital because it's deeply counterintuitive. How do you pass something on without a thing actually moving? The first analogy is lighting one candle with another.
Right. Imagine you have a lit candle, and you use it to light a second, unlit candle. Does the physical flame, the actual fire molecules of the first candle, jump over space and move to the second wick? No. The second flame arises in dependence on the heat of the first. The first conditioned the second, but there is transmission of energy without any transfer of substance.
The second analogy, again from the Milinda Punya, is milk turning into curd.
Yes. If you leave milk out, it ferments and turns into curd. Is the curd the exact same thing as the milk? No. But is it something totally unrelated to the milk? No, it couldn't exist without it. It is continuity under transformation. The famous formula Nagasena uses is nakaso, nakanyano, neither the same nor another.
And the third one is pressing a heavy signet seal into hot wax. The intricate pattern of the seal is transmitted perfectly into the wax, but no physical metal or material from the seal crosses over into the wax itself.
So what carries across death is the momentum of the existence drive, the craving, and the highly specific pattern of your past karmic actions.
Let me clarify something here, because I think a lot of people mix these terms up. What is the specific difference between karma and craving in this process? If karma is the accumulation of our past actions, isn't that the fuel for the next life?
No, and this is a crucial distinction if you want to understand how liberation works. In a text called AN 3.76, the Buddha gives a brilliant agricultural simile to explain the mechanics of rebirth. He says karma is the field, consciousness is the seed, but craving is the moisture.
Oh, wow. That perfectly separates the functions.
Yes, karma just provides the conditions, the soil. Your past actions dictate what kind of soil you land in, whether it's rich and fertile or rocky and harsh. But it is craving the moisture, the water, that makes the seed actually sprout into a new existence.
So if you dry up the moisture of craving, it doesn't matter how rich or expansive the karmic field is, nothing will ever sprout again.
Precisely. This is why an enlightened being, an arahant, can still act and physically generate karma while they're alive, but because their mind has zero craving, zero moisture, those actions never sprout into a future rebirth.
Okay, logically I follow this. The mechanics make perfect sense. But I have to ask on behalf of myself and everyone listening, if this self is just an illusion, if it's just a stressful, exhausting whirlpool of causes and conditions, why do you and I cling to me so fiercely? Why is it so unbelievably hard to let go? If it's a burning fire, why don't we just drop it?
Because it works. That is the uncomfortable biological truth. It is the default setting of the organism for a reason. Self-modeling is an enormously useful evolutionary strategy for survival in the physical world. An organism that firmly, inherently believes this physical body must be fed, this territory is mine, these are my resources, I must protect myself, is going to survive, fight, and reproduce far better than an organism that views itself as an impersonal stream of phenomena.
It's essentially a highly advanced predictive control system.
Exactly, and like all flawlessly designed systems, it is totally transparent to the user. You look through the illusion, not at it, so it doesn't feel like a model. It feels like reality. The Buddha recognized how deeply entrenched this is, and he broke this self-attachment down into layers.
What are the layers?
The top, most superficial layer is Sakayadihi. This is the intellectual, philosophical view of a self. You can actually break this layer relatively early in Buddhist practice just by deeply understanding the logic we are discussing today.
You can rationally agree that you have no self, but there's a deeper layer that survives rational thought.
Yes, the much deeper layer is Asmimana. This is the subterranean instinctual conceit of I am. It's a background hum, a felt biological sense of self-reference. You can totally intellectually agree that you have no self and still instantly flinch, get defensive, and experience anger when someone insults you. That deep, visceral conceit of I am persists until the very, very final stages of awakening.
The texts also point out another reason it's so tenacious. MN22 says that directly looking at this illusion is deeply, fundamentally frightening.
It is terrifying. People hear the teaching of non-self and their ego panics. They think, I'm going to be annihilated. I won't exist. It's nihilism. The Buddha pointed out the tragic irony of this reaction. They are utterly terrified of losing something they never actually had in the first place. But the fear is very real, and it gives the mind a powerful subconscious motive to look away, distract itself, and keep the illusion running at all costs.
Which brings us to the ultimate question. We have the diagnosis. We see the terrifying wiring diagram of the illusion. We know it's guarded by fear. So how do we safely dismantle the machine without panicking? Because as a beginner listening to this, I can't just snap my fingers and have perfect right view. I'm still caught in the illusion.
And the tradition explicitly acknowledges that you are caught. It doesn't expect perfection immediately. This is where the role of faith comes in. In Pali, the word is siddha. But we have to clarify this, because it is not blind, dogmatic belief in a deity or a set of unprovable assertions. It is provisional trust.
Like trusting a doctor before the medicine has actually cured you. You don't have proof you're cured, but you trust the process based on the doctor's credentials.
Exactly. You trust the logical coherence of the teaching, the ethical character of the teacher, and the visible, peaceful results in those who practice it. It is scaffolding. When you build a brick building, you need scaffolding to stand on. But once the building stands firmly on its own, you tear the scaffolding down. Siddha is designed to be self-consuming. It gets you to practice, and then it is replaced by direct, verifiable experience.
That perfectly aligns with the famous Kalama Sutta, where the Buddha basically tells a group of villagers not to just believe things because of tradition, scripture, or even because a revered teacher said so. He tells them to test the mechanics in their own lives.
Right. His test was purely pragmatic. When you adopt these qualities, do they lead to harm and suffering or to welfare and peace? Faith gets you onto the path, but the practice itself turns that faith into direct knowing.
And the path is, of course, the Noble Eightfold Path. We won't list all 8 factors right now, but it's important to understand the structure. It's divided into 3 primary trainings: wisdom, ethics, and meditation. And the sources emphasize that it is not a linear staircase where you finish one step and move to the next.
No, the Buddha compared the 8 factors to strands of a single rope. They weave around and continuously reinforce each other. Right view is the forerunner. A rough, conceptual understanding of suffering motivates you to practice ethics. Living a highly ethical, blameless life calms your mind down and removes regret, which creates the conditions for deep meditation. And successful meditation generates the insight that deepens your right view from an intellectual idea into a lived reality. It's an upward spiral.
The meditation component brings us to the famous practice of Mahasatidhana, or mindfulness. But the original sources make a massive critical point here that contradicts a lot of modern wellness apps. Mindfulness is not just bare attention. It isn't just sitting there passively, non-judgmentally watching things happen like a cow watching traffic.
No, true Buddhist mindfulness has right view built actively into it. The practice is broken into 4 foundations: watching the body, watching feeling, watching the mind, and watching dhammas, which means actively observing reality through the Buddha's specific analytical categories, like the 5 aggregates we discussed.
And there's a critical refrain repeated over and over in the texts for this practice.
Yes. The instruction is that you don't just watch. You must watch the nature of arising, the nature of passing away, and you dwell independent, not clinging to anything in the world. You are actively, intentionally inserting the perception of impermanence and non-self into every single object you observe. You are watching the whirlpool and reminding yourself it's just water. That active observation is what starves the underlying ignorance.
So what does this all mean? I have to raise a massive contradiction I found in the sources. I was looking at the 7 factors of awakening, which are the mental qualities you are supposed to cultivate to reach enlightenment. One of the core factors is rapture, or piti, joy, meditative bliss. But wait, if craving for pleasant feeling is the whole problem, if it's the fuel for the fire, isn't enjoying meditative bliss a giant trap? Aren't we just substituting worldly craving for a spiritual high?
I love this nuance so much because it shows the absolute genius of the psychological system. It seems like a glaring contradiction, but it is actually a highly engineered mechanism. First, the text distinguished between piti, which is an uplifting, energizing interest in an object, and sukha, which is the actual pleasant-feeling tone. But more importantly, the Buddha divided all pleasure into 2 entirely different categories based on their origin.
What are the 2 categories?
Samisa, which is pleasure of the flesh, arising from sensuality in the material world, and niramasa, which is unworldly pleasure, arising strictly from renunciation and letting go.
Why is the second one safe to experience?
Because of its causal mechanism. Sensual pleasure is caused by grasping. You want the rich food, you grab it, you consume it, you feel pleasure. It feeds the loop of craving. Niramisa pleasure, the profound bliss of deep meditation, is caused precisely by letting go. It only arises when the mental hindrances of greed, ill will, and anxiety temporarily subside. You cannot force it to happen. You cannot grasp it. The harder your ego grasps for meditative rapture, the further away it runs.
So it's a pleasure that actually rewards relinquishment rather than acquisition.
Yes, and the Buddha encouraged his monks to cultivate it because it displaces sensual craving. It offers the mind a superior, cleaner pleasure that is born of freedom, not bondage. It is used intentionally, like a controlled burn in forestry. You use a small intentional fire of meditative joy to consume the dry, dangerous brush of worldly desire so a catastrophic wildfire can't take hold.
But it can still be a hazard if you aren't careful.
Right. Absolutely. The tradition calls this hazard nikkanti, which means subtle craving or attachment. You can get profoundly attached to the bliss and peace of deep meditation and just want to stay on the cushion forever. Which is exactly why rapture is only factor number 4 out of 7 in the factors of awakening. It is a tool, not the destination. The intense rapture must naturally hand off to tranquility, which then deepens into profound concentration and ultimately terminates in equanimity, or upekkha.
Equanimity, the final balance.
Yes, perfect, unshakable, transparent balance toward both the pleasant and the unpleasant, the rapture and the pain. That is the launch pad for ultimate liberation.
This has been an unbelievable journey through the actual original machinery of the mind. Let's synthesize this for you, the listener. Based on these ancient, rigorous texts in our deep dive today, you are a process, not a solid thing. You are a rapidly spinning whirlpool of physical forms, feeling tones, perceptions, habits, and bare awareness. The pain and stress you feel in life is the heat of the defilements, greed, hatred, and delusion burning ferociously on the fuel of your own constant craving.
But the fire can go out. The prognosis is good, not by following the flames, and not by trying to annihilate yourself, but by systematically starving the fire, by catching the exact microsecond a feeling arises, recognizing that it is impermanent and not you, and simply refusing to let it turn into a craving.
Which brings me to a final provocative thought I want to leave you to mull over today. We've established that your self isn't a solid, permanent object. It is a dynamic whirlpool that you actively have to keep spinning moment by moment by constantly reacting, constantly defending your ego, and constantly craving for things to be different. It takes a massive, exhausting amount of hidden effort to maintain the illusion of you. So what happens if just for 5 seconds today, you simply stop putting in the effort to be somebody?
You might just catch a glimpse of the fire going out.
Thank you so much for guiding us through this incredibly dense material, and thank you, the listener, for taking this deep dive into the original mechanics of Buddhist philosophy. Until next time, keep questioning the mirror.